The mini set has actually done a lot in order to change the Hearthstone meta, so I'm going to show you guys the top 5 decks that you can hit Legend with. And don't forget, if you do enjoy this kind of content, feel free to like this video and subscribe to the YouTube channel in order to let me know that you do agree with this list here, because I actually have a lot of different decks that I'm going to show you guys today. But first and foremost, I want to show you guys the deck that I recommended on the very first day of the expansion, where I'm like, you know what, this is going to be the best deck in the game. And if we take a look at this deck is literally what Gabby used to reach rank 1 legend the other day. I was watching his stream and he was like 10-6 on rank 1 legend, so the dude is absolutely winning so many games, and he's doing it with this list right here. The only difference between this list and what I just showed you is that he took out Instrument Tech and another card in order to put in 2 Roaring Applauses for extra card draw. So I just wanted to say that I knew that Enrage Warrior was going to be the best deck in the game, but Gabby actually put through the effort, hit rank 1 legend with this deck, and maintain how good Enrage Warrior is as a deck. I really haven't been playing this deck all too much since the first day of the update, because I've been trying a lot of other cards, and trust me, I have played almost every single new card that has come out from Festival of Legends that is worth experimenting with, and there are a lot of new cards that are making their way into the meta. Case in point, the Jam Session, it's just insane for Enrage Warrior. You don't even need Pyromancer anymore. But yeah, we don't need Pyromancer anymore because Jam Session enables these combos already, so you don't need an extra minion that can sometimes get in the way of Chorus Riff, or sometimes can eat buffs from Anima Extractor if you don't have the mana to play it. So this deck just feels really good if you are a fan of Enrage Warrior. However, there is another Enrage Warrior deck running around from No Hands Gamer where we actually play Frightened Flunky, and the reason why this deck does make a little bit of sense is because if you play Frightened Flunky on turn 2, you know, first of all, you have a taunt getting in the way of some of the mid-range aggressive decks that you'll be going up against, but more importantly, if your opponent has a minion and they can't kill this, you can trade the Flunky and immediately start getting a beefy taunt out of nowhere. Plus, you know, discovering a taunt minion and then finding like an Anima combo in order to buff up a taunt really can go a pretty long distance. But the one thing I'm kind of uncertain about with this deck is just how this doesn't really help the game plan a lot, you know what I mean? Like, you're not really doing anything with Anima Extractor. It's another minion that kind of gets in the way of doing like your big pop-off, and it just kind of feels unnecessary in a lot of situations. Granted, I've never played this deck. I would highly recommend checking out No Hands Gamer's deck and video, which I will be leaving in the description below. But I would say that if you want to play a different version of Enrage Warrior that maybe is more about playing minions instead of building up a gigantic combo, this might be a way of doing such. But keeping on the Warrior train, there is a lot of conversation surrounding Menagerie Warrior right now. And keep in mind, these decks aren't listed in any particular order. I'm mostly just going through each class as I thought about them. But Enrage Warrior and Warrior in general is so good to where it's number 3 on HS Replay right now. That's right, Warrior is no longer in dead last place when it comes to power level. It is now a legitimate class that has a few good playable decks, and this is one of them that I would highly recommend if you want your games to feel like your choices really do matter. One thing that I have to point out about this deck that a lot of people may not think about at first glance is the Rockmaster Voone into Zola the Gordon combo, where you can literally generate infinite cards in hand every other turn in order to get the key cards that you want. Case in point, if you play a lot of weapons, you can get a 0 mana Abyssal Bassist and a 5 mana Amalgam Band from out of Nelly, or just using your regular Amalgam Band from your actual deck. But if you can somehow create a loop where you're always playing, you know, Voone into Zola on the Voone to get it back in hand, and then you have, you know, Abyssal Bassist and 1 Amalgam Bands filling up your hand, you are going to always restabilize. You're going to be able to destroy any minion. You'll get lifesteal. This is like the deck that really wants to be able to go to fatigue in order to pop off this combo, because not a lot of decks can deal with like the 3rd or 4th 1 Amalgam Band. And the great thing about 1 Amalgam Band is that if you happen to discover demons, there are only 4 demons within all of the all the warrior cards, but Amalgam of the Deep cannot find Amalgam of the Deep. So really, when you discover on your Abyssal Basis, you will guarantee find another Abyssal Basis or the 1 Amalgam Band. So you could also do this with totems. There's not that many totems and there's not that many Quillbores, but it's more of like a 50-50. So if you want a guaranteed roll Amalgam Band, discover on your demon. This card is probably going to cost 0 mana in most instances anyway, and lifesteal is very crucial to do well with this deck. And I'm not really sure where I've seen this list pop up. I'm not sure if this was Pheno or another competitive player, but there are some people that are actually running the Rancher in this deck, and I really don't know why. In all honesty, I think this deck is just trying to be a little bit more, you know, early game oriented, so you don't fall behind as quickly as this deck kind of can at times. But with all the 1-drops, with all the synergies between, like, you know, the Click Clockers, the Rolling Stones, and the Rancher, you can probably summon a pretty impressive board as early as, like, turn 3, turn 4. And this deck is also trying to make use of Backstage Bouncer. But if you want my honest opinion, this card just feels kind of unnecessary in a lot of instances. I much prefer the other list because you care more about building up the gigantic game plan versus going for like an all-in aggressive start, because unfortunately, like, this is still like one of those decks that really wants to be able to get Master Rock Voone value, but you're not even playing Zola in this list. So I'm not really sure about this list in particular, but there are a lot of people that are playing this at higher legend ranks, so there might be something that I'm not seeing technically, because I really haven't played this list at all. I've just seen this list a lot on my legend climb, which, by the way, I didn't even tell you guys. I did actually hit legend, if I can move myself. Boom, there you go. And I will be showing the deck that I hit legend with after this deck right here. But regardless, I would argue that this is probably the more aggressive version to play Menagerie Warrior, but I am much more of a fan of the Zola Master Rock Voone combo because it just seems better in my opinion. Stop the presses. Stop everything. You're not tripping. I actually did hit legend with this Hunter deck, and I've got some stats that I'm going to showcase to you guys in order to really, you know, drive home how good this deck was, because I originally told you guys that I wanted to hit legend with a funny DK deck. I wanted to play Egg DK, but the reason why I stopped playing Egg DK was because I wanted to try and switch things up and start playing Cagehead to legend. And I will be showcasing that deck later, but I'll go ahead and spoil it. It is just, it may not be as good of a deck as I was hoping, even though someone was able to reach top 10 legend with it and is claiming that it's one of the best decks that you can play with at the moment. But I would argue that this is the deck that I've had the most amount of success with outside of like Warrior, and it's really refreshing that there's a Hunter deck that actually makes me want to play Hunter. I played 40 games of this yesterday. All of these games were played yesterday. Some of them are very quick, some of them can kind of drag out, but let's just say that Hollow Hound is just simply a broken card. 26 and 13 with a 67% win rate, and the only reason why I didn't hit legend faster is because I went like 6 and 13 with another deck yesterday trying to make that work. So this deck was not only winning games, but it was picking up the slack of the decks that just straight up weren't winning for me. And something that I absolutely love about this deck is the Hollow Hound. It is absolutely unreal how good this card is in the deck, to where we don't even care about you know, we actually care about buffing up cards in our deck now with like Hope of Kel'Thalas, to where you can give this thing 5 attack, and this is just a mini Reno with Rush. It's absolutely insane how good this card is. One other synergy that I have to make note of is the Brightwing. Brightwing actually has a slot in this deck for 2 reasons. Number 1, there is Star Power, which, if you think about it, giving this extra +1 spell damage means that you are adding an extra 6 damage on top of this card. And this is probably one of the most, like, one of the best performing cards of the mini set, just because this is exactly what Hunter wants. It wants removal, and it wants synergies with its Arcane package. This card is probably okay in Mage as well, but Mage is kind of meh right now. Unfortunately, there's no Mage decks on this list. I would highly recommend Naga Mage if you want to play Mage. But another reason why we have this card is because of Conjured Arrow. Much needed card draw in some situations. 3 card draw really can go the distance. But one other thing that I have to point out, Faithful Companions. This card used to be not so good. You would just always go all in on King Crush. But now that we only play 3 beasts of King Crush, Hydrolodon, and the Hollow Hound, you can guarantee find whatever beast that you need in whatever situation. You can still go for big King Crushes, but, you know, finding Hollow Hound from your deck guaranteed, really powerful synergy, and then you just have Selective Breeder in order to, you know, fill in the gaps of whatever beasts that you need in whatever situation. Sometimes double Hydrolodon can be really good in the mirror. Sometimes, you know, you want to go for King Crush against those control decks where you want to, like, OTK them with a Stranglethorn Heart. Sometimes you just simply want a Hollow Hound against an aggro deck, so that way when you reach turn 5, turn 6, you know that you're going to take them off the board. And I will go ahead and spoil one other thing. This deck is kind of keeping Death Knight decks at bay, like Unholy DK and Frost DK, because I literally could not lose to a Frost DK with this deck. Frosty K used to be the best deck in the meta, right? And I would argue it would have been insane before the mini sets, because it's what I used to, you know, get the 12 wins in the Tavern Brawl. But Frosty K Stonks seem to be going down massively because of this card in particular. And now I have to talk about the one deck I never want to see play again. Unfortunately, Spell DK is actually a very legitimate deck, and it's simply due to the fact that they got another 0 mana card, and it gives you +1/+1 in some situations. You don't even really care about the rush. You really just care that this is a 0 mana, make your Lady Setheno attack, to where we are now playing Abusive Sergeant yet again, and I believe it was Dreadeye that ended up hitting rank 1 Legend with this deck, but there was somebody else that also hit rank 1 Legend with this deck. And top 1000 Legend, this deck is completely coming back. I really hope it's not going to stay, but it looks like it is, because the power level of this deck, it feels the same. It just straight up feels the same. You don't really care about Sinful Brand. In fact, I'm glad that that card was nerfed, but the thing that really makes me frustrated about this deck is that Lady Setheno combos can not only remove your board, but it can just straight up kill you. And through the Fell in Flames, it's just such an insane synergy to have with Lady Setheno that I literally cannot imagine a world where Lady Setheno does not get nerfed in the next balance patch. I just really don't see that not happening, you know? This card is just way too broken. The synergies are way too good, and when you pair it with Silvermoon Arcanist and Unleash Fell, essentially acting as a Reno combo, like, if it was just this and Lady Setheno didn't exist, I would be a lot less stressed when this combo hits me. But because of how easily Lady Setheno destroys and seals games up without any effort, in all honesty, this combo just becomes a lot more, you know, tilting, especially when you consider how many of the Demon Hunter decks are also playing this combo. So, if you want to be degenerate, go ahead and play this deck to Legend. It will probably do very well. Maybe there's some decisions that might, you know, dictate whether or not you win more games than not. But the thing about this deck is it's just unkillable. It's just unkillable unless we do something to Lady Setheno. And I'm starting to feel like we're getting to that point where this card really needs a nerf. And another reason why I'm going to tell you guys why I think Lady Setheno needs a nerf is because it's also good in Outcast Demon Hunter. Now, granted, I think this deck is a lot healthier for the game because it's essentially like almost like an aggro mid-range deck instead of a mid-range aggro deck where, like, you want to try and go to the late game with this deck. But the thing about this that I really enjoy is that there are a lot of synergies and a lot of different ways of being able to play this. So I'm a lot more forgiving of Outcast Demon Hunter than I am Spell Demon Hunter, because this deck actually has, like, you know, some work you have to put in and some decisions that you actually have to make. But the Lady Setheno into the Hellevaria Dark Raven is absolutely insane when you pair it with Through the Fire and Flames. Like, it's just insane, dude. It really is. There's no other way to put it. So every single time that, you know, Lady Setheno attacks with the rush, because you straight up give it rush before, you know, the finale hits, then Hellevaria will buff up all your minions, including the Setheno. So you can, you know, play you can play Through the Fire and Flames, double Dispose Evidence. This will attack 3 times, and then suddenly this will be at 5 attack. You don't even need Abusive Sergeant in a deck like this. Not like you would play it in Outcast Demon Hunter anyway. But it's really insane to me how this legendary is really carrying Demon Hunter. And it does make me wonder, like, if they nerf it, how bad this class is going to fall off. Because the thing about Demon Hunter right now is that it's like 6th, I think, on HS Replay. But there's a lot of decisions that come with some of these Demon Hunter decks, so it makes sense why the win rate's not nearly as high, because people at the lower ranks are just not playing this deck as effectively. But when you see this deck perform at top 1000 Legend, it really opens your eyes to the synergies that are possible, because, you know, Rancher combos, being able to play a bunch of minions, you have 1/1s that get buffed with Hellevaria if you need to. There's just a lot of things going for this deck, and I really enjoy what this deck provides to the meta. But again, Lady Setheno, it's a card that I envision getting nerfed. I don't want to spend too much time talking about this deck, but unfortunately, it's one of the best performing decks, especially on your way to Legend, that I have to put it in this list. And it's kind of funny how, like, a lot of people were messing with a lot of different ideas with, like, with Pure Paladin, where, like, I straight up saw people not playing this card, for example, and going for, like, a more minion-based deck. But let's be honest, dude. Wind Fury on a weapon is broken. Especially when you can literally have Rockbiter weapon with lifesteal. Like, this, I do not understand how Paladin was allowed these cards, because now Pure Paladin has one of the best removal tools in order to get rid of Gigantic Taunts, which is already a weakness of it. But now this card is, like, you don't even think about this card removing. Like, you don't even think about the effect setting its stats to 3/3 whenever you attack a minion. No. It's all about the Wind Fury, baby. It's all about Feast and Famine. It's all about Verkelthelos in order to deal, you know, 6, 10, 12 damage with this weapon. It just goes face, dude. And that's the thing that I really despise about this, because I thought this would see play in Big Paladin. And it does, but it's not nearly as good as in Pure Paladin, because you're constantly jamming onto the board, you're always dealing damage, and then suddenly you have this gigantic amount of damage, and Countess combos, and an Anachronos, and Light Ray, Light Cheat. Like, there's just so much cheating that goes on in this deck, in my opinion. And I gotta give a huge shout out to Noodle Swoop for coming up with this archetype that has been very, very much adopted by so many people, to where this is the most popular Pure Paladin deck, I believe, on HS Replay right now. And there's a reason for it. Like, the synergies of this deck are very much there, but I don't want to suggest playing this deck because I really don't like what Pure Paladin has become. But I will admit, if you do want some easy wins, this is probably the deck to do it with. However, I imagine there might be something getting nerfed in this deck, because, dude, we could already make the argument that Countess minions should cost 1 mana instead of, like you play the 2-mana invitation, you get a 1-mana legendary instead of a 0-mana legendary, because the scams that this card can generate are super tilting, in my opinion. But, oh my god, the win... This card is just absolutely insane, and I feel like maybe something needs to be done to Pure Paladin, because it is the #1 class on HS Replay by, like, 3%, I believe. It's like a 56% win rate last time that I checked. And Pure Paladin is just the absolute nuts, especially if you want just like the easiest, best deck, even the fastest deck to climb the legend with. You will see some struggles at like rank 5 and whatnot, because people know how to play around Pure Paladin. But if you want an easy diamond rank, this is just the way to go. Control Priest really hasn't changed all much since the mini set, but I will say that this is definitely the anti-fun deck if you're trying to beat up on people experimenting with new cards. Meatman, of course, hit rank 1 legend with this deck. There's really not much to say, because I really don't like playing Control Priest personally. If you want to check out someone who knows how to play this deck, just watch Meatman. Meaty's always streaming on Twitch around this time. He's always got, like, you know, 1,000+ viewers, so clearly the man knows what he's doing. But yeah, Control Priest is still a very good deck. I would say the biggest advice that I can give you with my limited knowledge of this deck is to watch out how you use your Dirty Rats, guys. Come on, don't just throw Dirty Rat on turn 2 because it's your turn 2 play and it's a taunt minion. I actually have a funny screenshot that I need to show you on why you just don't rat as soon as you can. This is the reason why you don't Dirty Rat. Because look at this Priest. It is turn 4, and they are getting hit with all this damage because this Priest apparently pulled out Cagehead. And yeah, look at all this damage that's possible on turn 4. If you're gonna play Dirty Rat, you better have an answer like the Light It Burns or Shard the Naru ready to go, so that way if something hits the field that you don't want to see, you're not just gonna automatically lose the game. So for the love of God, if you're gonna play Dirty Rat, make sure you have a reason why you're playing it. I'm not going to spend too much time talking about this deck either, because it's just regular green DK, and I hate to say it, but DK is kind of falling out of favor right now because of the metagame that is building around it. I'm not necessarily saying that it's bad. Like, you could still play Frost DK and you can still play this deck for sure and get a lot of W's. But the thing about Death Knight right now is that the Lifesteal Hollowhound and a lot of like the Paladins running around are kind of giving this deck a little bit of competition. Now, granted, this deck does do okay against, like, Pure Paladins, but remember that scam that I was telling you about? Like, that lifesteal can really go a long way to where if you don't have the Grave Strength ready to go, then you're just simply not gonna win the game. And this is part of the reason why, like, I feel like Magatha actually slots very well into this deck. Really the only new card that's seeing play in here, but you only have like 4 spells in the entire deck, so Magatha really does add a lot of value into this deck, as well as the Yelling Yodeler. Obviously, we now are playing Nerubian Eggs and Foul Eggs in order to get as much value from this card as possible, and I gotta give a shout out to this card. This is personally my favorite. Death Knight has a lot of really interesting ways to utilize this. Hunter has ways of using it too, but it's not nearly as powerful. That I feel like people have kind of given up on this card in Hunter, at least for the time being. But yeah, green DK is very powerful, but if you want something a little bit more fun to play, can I offer you an egg in these trying times? Yeah, that's right. Egg DK is actually a deck I'm going to recommend if you want to go a little bit of a different direction. Obviously, it's very weak against Priest if you get silenced, and I didn't really see a lot of this deck yesterday on my climb, but 2 days ago I saw a lot of people playing it, and I'm going to try playing this deck again in Top Legend to see just how good it is, because I want to try and take a Death Knight deck to the highest rank that I possibly can, especially if it's a little bit of an interesting build. But one thing that I absolutely love about this deck is the Naval Mine synergy actually working. I theorized when I saw Death Growl that Naval Mine DK might actually be a real deck, but it turns out all we really needed was a Yelling Yodeler in order to give us a reason to play this deck. So now with Naval Mine, you can deal an automatic 8 damage. You can attach its Death Rattle to 2 other minions to where there's now 12 damage on the field. So this card can automatically deal like 20 damage depending on what you're doing. And if you got Might of Menethil and Rowdy Fan and all these other cards working for you, there is just a lot of potential with this deck. Now, granted, the card draw is not the most insane. That's why, you know, cards like Chillfall and Baron are very important with this deck, and there may be some situations where you have to play Death Growl with the card draw tool in order to refill, but this is just one of those decks to where if you go all in on the egg and your opponent doesn't clear it and you play Yelling Yodeler, you simply win the game. Now, at higher legend ranks, you are going to go up against people that are going to automatically kill the egg if they know what you are doing. But this is the great thing about DK. Like, you don't know what it is until it's too late in some instances. Some people just straight up won't kill the eggs to where if you coin the Yodeler on turn 3, automatic win. But even if they do that, like, even if they do destroy the egg, you could just play another one and then wait for the Yodeler whenever it's time, and then you have cards like Rowdy Fan to where if you don't have Yodeler, you can still make use of these eggs. I just really like what this deck is doing, mostly due to the fact that Horn of Winter can give you automatic value from your Yodeler if you want to set it up, but most importantly, it's because of Might of Menethil. Might of Menethil is essentially your Frost Rim Fury in this deck, because by the time that you play this, you are going to freeze almost every single minion that you happen to find. So this deck has a lot going for it. It is my favorite deck of this expansion. Even the next deck that I'm showing you, I enjoy this deck more, but the next deck has my favorite legendary that I wish would see a little bit more play in more decks, but hey man, he's at least got a playable deck now. Last and unfortunately least, I wish I could say the opposite, but Cagehead DK is actually a real deck that people are playing in top legend, to where I even saw someone climbing in top 10 legend with this deck. Like, I don't know how this happened, okay? I do not know how this happened. Rank 9 legend with this Cagehead deck. Apparently, he ended up going 3, 10, 13, 15. He had 15 games with this deck with an 80% win rate and top legend. And I feel like this was when people weren't expecting this combo. Because the thing about this deck that's very deceptive is actually how it looks like an aggressive deck until suddenly you're not playing an aggressive deck. You're pretty much playing, you know, regular green DK without the big payoffs like Grave Strength and Marrowgar, but you still do have 2 Unholy runes, so you have room for that Cagehead. So the main idea of this combo is that you play Bone Lord, you play Cagehead for 0 mana, you can Death Growl minions surrounding it, you can play Dead Air, you can play Yodeler. There's lots of ways of being able to trigger the Death Rattle from Cagehead, but the biggest issue with this deck is when you run out of resources in the early game and you start getting run down and you don't have the combo enabled. So this is really a tempo deck first before it is a combo deck. The combo is mostly in here as like a way to like catch people off guard, as a way of giving yourself like a different game plan in the late stages of the game, just in case your aggro deck build is not good enough. But you don't have Grave Strength and you don't have these big payoff cards to where you're really not going to be winning a lot through tempo unless you're like going up against a pure Paladin and just denying their board. But this deck is just so sweet that I can't not feature it in this deck, or that I can't not feature it in this video, due to the fact that, you know, there's a lot of really good decks right now. The meta's kind of the same, with like Hunters added, different DKs, and honestly, Demon Hunter's not as popular, but it's still very, very powerful. But this deck it's just so much fun. It's an insane amount of fun. Funky Monkey ended up popularizing this archetype on day 1 to where people were legitimately trying to figure out how to break this deck because it really feels like there's something here, and I feel like this might be the way to play this deck. So if you want to play Blightbore, if you want to spam the most metal card in the game, I would highly recommend playing Cagehead, but I have to warn you guys. I tried playing this deck, and I feel like I wouldn't be doing you guys a good service if I didn't tell you about this, but I tried playing this almost 20 games yesterday. I went 6-13, 32% win rate. I did not have a good time with this deck, honestly. But I have to admit, a lot of these games were extremely close, where I was like 1 turn away from popping off the combo, and there are probably a decent amount of these games where I just focused more on the combo than I did on actual tempo. So learn from me, learn from my mistakes. If you want to play this deck, go for tempo first, go for combo later. But there you guys have it. Those are the best decks that I believe that you can have the most fun with in Hearthstone, as well as the most wins with. And luckily, this mini set did actually shake things up enough to where I actually enjoy the meta that we have right now. However, the direction that we're going seems to be very dominated by Hunter, by Paladin, and by Demon Hunter. So these three decks are probably going to need some sort of change if things get too out of control. I would rather they just leave Hunter alone right now, because the Hunter deck that we see play actually has a lot of decision making. It has, you know, a good card that we don't just want to straight up nuke, because the lifesteal is really important for the archetype, and I'm just sick of seeing Paladins and Demon Hunters doing the exact same thing they've been doing for quite some time. And the lifesteal weapon, get out of here. That card is just absolutely busted. But I do believe that this meta is a lot more fun than the previous meta, and I'm having a lot of fun streaming over at twitch.tv/HELLSCREAM, so make sure you check that out. And also, if you haven't already, like this video and subscribe. So that's about it. So I hope you guys have fun, and yeah, play Cagehead. Cagehead's super fun. I hope you guys enjoy at least one of these decks that I've showcased to you, and if you happen to hit Legend, please let me know, because I'd love to know that my decks are actually, you know, making a difference for you. Thank you so much for making it to the end of this video, and we'll see you for the next one.